Hi and welcome back to The Bench. My name is Shai with Resurrection Instrument Repair, where we revive your instruments from the dead, one solder joint at a time. Today on The Bench, we have a vintage Teisco Checkmate 14 amp in for repair. This amp was dropped off at my shop after it randomly started squealing very loud. While I am disassembling this amp, let's take a moment to learn about the history of the Checkmate amps. Checkmate amps were produced by the Teisco musical instrument manufacturer based in Japan. Teisco was founded in 1948. It sold a wide range of products including guitars, amps, mics, synths, and drum kits. The Checkmate line of amps were released in 1964, featuring the Checkmate 15, 20, 25, and 50. In 1966, more amps were added to the Checkmate series, including the Checkmate 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, 100C, and the Checkmate Infinity. The Checkmate series feature both tube and solid-state versions of all of their amps. The one we will be repairing today is a solid-state version of the Checkmate 14. Now that we got the amp open, let's get started. The first thing that I like to do is some light cleaning and general service. I start by loosening all of the screws on the sides of the knobs. This allows for the knobs to easily slip off of the shaft of the pot, giving us access to the washers underneath. Once I got the knobs removed, I then loosened all of the washers on the pots and jacks, then desoldered and removed the pilot light so I could remove the faceplate, not only to clean it, but to also protect it while I'm working on the amp. Unlike Fender, who use silkscreen printing, which is a more durable printing method, Checkmate amps use pad printing to achieve the detailed wood grain finish on the faceplate. While the Checkmate's faceplates are more detailed, pad printing uses significantly less paint than screen printing, making Checkmate's faceplates a lot more susceptible to scratches. After removing and cleaning the faceplate, I set it aside and turn my focus to the electronics. I removed one of the pots from the amps and placed it over a paper towel. I then sprayed a liberal amount of contact cleaner into the hole of the pot before working the pot back and forth. This helps to distribute the contact cleaner inside of the pot evenly, ensuring we have a nice quiet pot. I repeat this process with the rest of the pots and with the jacks. Once I finished cleaning up the pots, I then went through and touched up and reflowed all of the solder joints on the pots and jacks. I do this because solder joints on pots and jacks are more susceptible to cracking due to them being used physically versus other components like a capacitor that would just sit inside of the amp. After going through and doing this to all of the solder joints, I then use a small brush with some isopropyl alcohol to clean the flux off of the solder joints. I do this because flux can be acidic and attract moisture from out of the air. Over time, this can cause corrosion to develop, and if you guys have been here for a while, we all know just how bad corrosion is for amps. After repeating this process to all of the solder joints, I then reinstall the faceplate and the electronics back into the amp. Next, I turn my focus to the rest of the electronics. Unfortunately, my camera died while I was filming, and I did not notice until I had already repaired the loud squealing noise. While I don't have any video footage of this part, I still want to walk you guys through what was causing the squealing. Before I start working on any amplifier, I will normally take a few moments to look at and study the amp before diving in. While inspecting the amp, I noticed that this little wire here was unplugged. This wire is connected to the output transistors. If you have one of these unplugged, it can cause a variety of issues, including creating a feedback loop, which can result in uncontrollable squealing, hissing, or even whistling. After replugging in the output transistor, the squealing noise stopped and the amp was back to being as quiet as a mouse. After fixing the loud squealing noise, I then got started on preventative maintenance. Located inside of all guitar amps are a component called electrolytic capacitors. Electrolytic caps naturally fail over time, and while this may not seem like a big deal, in reality, bad electrolytic caps could be a death sentence depending on what style of amp you have. Located inside of electrolytic caps is electrolyte, an extremely corrosive substance. As caps begin to fail, electrolyte can leak out onto the board, which can cause some pretty big issues, including degradation and damage to the trace, damage to the surrounding components, and in some cases, if the electrolyte comes into contact with voltage, it can actually act as a conductor, causing unwanted connections to be made, which can cause damage or blow up other components. On top of that, as capacitors begin to fail, very similar to batteries, hydrogen gas can build up inside of caps, resulting in bulging caps, and if this pressure reaches its max, it can result in the capacitor blowing up, which can cause major damage to your amp. In order to prevent these issues, it is recommended that you replace the caps inside of your amp every 10 to 15 years. That is what you see me doing here. When it comes to recapping your amp, there are a few things that you need in order to ensure you do not damage your amp. The first being a good soldering station with an adjustable temperature control. A lot of cheap irons you find at your local hardware stores or just laying around your house are set temp irons, meaning you cannot control the temperature. Most of the times these irons are way too hot, and when you try to solder with them, you will lift, burn, or break the traces, which could turn a simple repair into an absolute nightmare. I recommend purchasing the Weller WE1010 at a soldering station, retailing at just $191. This is a great high-quality soldering iron at a fairly low cost. This iron, along with all of the other materials used in this repair, are linked in the caption below. Next, you will need a good solder sucker and high-quality solder wick to ensure you remove your components cleanly and do not rip your traces. I only recommend NTE branded solder wick, as every other solder wick I have ever tried is really bad quality. It just sticks to the board and makes a huge mess. Next, you will need an acid neutralizer spray to neutralize any electrolyte that may have leaked out of the caps. I personally use NOCO branded battery cleaner plus acid detect, which you can find at your local automotive parts store. Before starting any repair, I always make sure to take detailed videos and photos of the board I will be working on. This is extremely important to do so you have a reference to the original circuit. Speaking from experience, do not, for any reason, skip this step. After taking reference videos and photos, I turn my iron to about 650 degrees and tin the tip of my iron. I gently lay the tip of my iron onto one of the legs of the caps. Once the solder starts to melt and become liquid, I position my solder sucker over the solder and click the button. This sucks a large majority of the solder away from the board. I then repeat this step to the other legs of the caps. Once I have a majority of the solder removed from both of the cap legs, I then place my solder wick over one of the cap legs and then gently lay my iron on top of the solder wick. This helps to remove the rest of the solder. I then repeat this step to the other leg of the cap. On most amps, the caps would have just popped out, but on this amp, they actually fold the legs of the cap over to help tighten the cap down to the board. In this case, I use my iron to heat up one of the legs while using a small flathead screwdriver and a pair of pliers to gently straighten out the cap legs, allowing me to now remove it from the board. I then repeat this step to the other leg of the cap. Once I reach this point, I stop everything that I am doing and flip the board back over to check the polarity of the cap. After noting the polarity of the cap by looking at the band on the cap, I remove the cap. This is incredibly important to not forget to do this step, as if you install a polarized cap in backwards, it can blow up and hurt you or severely damage your amp. If you would like to learn more about caps and polarity, I have linked a blog post that I wrote that goes in depth about this topic in the caption of the video. After making sure I have my polarity right, I then install the new cap and flow some solder over the legs. I then repeat this process for all of the other caps in the amp. While recapping the amp, I did come across a few caps that had leaked out electrolyte. When this happens, I will spray some acid neutralizer into a small cup, then place the acid neutralizer onto the affected areas and let that sit for a few minutes. After letting it sit, I then use a Q-tip dipped in some isopropyl alcohol to remove the acid neutralizer before installing the new cap. Once I replaced all of the caps, I then referenced back to my photos and video. After confirming that the caps were installed correctly, I then set the amp aside. Now that I have all of the hard work out of the way, I get to do some in-depth cleaning. The first thing that I like to do is cleaning and buffing the amp's hardware. This includes all of the washers and nuts from the pots and jacks, as well as the amp handle caps. I start by putting some turtle wax into a small tray and dipping a Q-tip into it and begin working the wax in a circular motion. You could also do this and achieve a mirror finish shine by using a Dremel with a buffing wheel, but if you do decide to do this, it is important that you do a test spot first, as some hardware is just plated, and under the high speed of the Dremel, it can actually cause the finish to melt off, exposing a different color metal underneath. Likewise, if you have painted hardware, you could skip this step altogether, as this can cause damage to the hardware. After I finish that, I then turn my focus to the amp's cab. After disassembling the cab and removing the speakers, I started the cleaning process by doing a small test sample of turtle wax car cleaner in an inconspicuous part of the amp. I then used a fine bristle brush to work the product in. After a good scrubbing, I then sprayed a liberal amount of water onto the test spot to help float all of the dirt up to the surface before wiping it away with a paper towel. Ideally, you will want to let this test spot sit for at least 24 hours to ensure that there is no reaction from the cleaning products and the Tolex, as all Tolex is and will respond differently. Luckily, there is normally never a reaction, but in the event that there is, the only reaction I have ever seen is this white chalky buildup that appears on the amp. And don't worry, I did this to my own personal amp, just so you guys can see what the reaction looks like. This reaction normally only happens if you soak the amp in cleaner and do not properly remove it. Luckily, if this does happen, it is totally reversible. After I made sure the Tolex was fine, I then repeated this step to the rest of the amp. After I finished that, I then cleaned the grill cloth with a damp sponge and polished the emblem before reassembling the amp and testing it out. If you guys enjoyed today's video of seeing this Teisco Checkmate amp repaired and restored, be sure to like and subscribe for more. And if you guys have not already, you can follow me on all social platforms, which are linked in the caption, where I post even more musical instrument repair content daily. If you guys have made it this far in the video, comment something that you've learned from this video or a topic that you would like to see me cover. If you guys want to hear this amp in action, just stick around till the end of the video for a short demo. Alrighty guys, and with all of that out of the way, remember, fix what you can, share what you know, and always play with your heart. We are all in this jam together. Until next time, peace.